Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's podcast is focused on the capabilities and skills of professional product ownership, something very near to my heart. The professional product ownership capabilities and skills provide a view of what we believe at Scrum.org are important skills and capabilities for product ownership. They describe the things a product-led organization needs to think about when evolving its capabilities. So if you're product-led, you need to think about these capabilities. To talk about this very interesting subject, I'm actually joined by two fabulous PSTs, professional Scrum trainers, Paul Kuijten and Fredrik Wendt. They were heavily involved in working with the community building this model. So I'm really excited to have them on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Paul and Fredrik.
Thank you.
Hey, how you doing?
It's great. It's great. I'm doing very well. It's nice to see your smiling faces. Obviously, our listeners don't see that, but just for reference, listeners, they are both smiling because they're also excited to talk about this. This is actually, though, the fourth podcast. You know, it's like a Star Wars movie now, right? It's the fourth podcast on this subject. Hopefully this is better than the fourth Star Wars movie, but anyway. And in the first podcast, we discussed the overall model. The second, we zoomed in on engage with vision, which is the first sort of tree of the model. The third podcast, we discussed the lead to value. And the final podcast, we're going to talk about evolve with validation, the final leg of the model. If you want to remember the model, it's pretty easy. It's vision, value, and validation. It's the 3 V's, which if some of you attended professional Scrum product owner class, you'll be aware that this is a sort of theme where we've expanded that and really added a lot more content and detail about these 3 V's of vision, value, and validation. And today we're going to be talking about validation, evolve with validation. Fredrik, can you kick us off and sort of give us the sort of high-level view of this capability?
Absolutely. So in relation to the other legs, this is in a way the smallest one because it has the least kind of topics or areas to master, but it's a critical one, and so it's not the least important just because it's the last one. So the overall idea is complexity and learning and not knowing what the market will think and what users like, what will delight them, etc., and what to do about that problem really. How can we grow our understanding of all of these topics and subjects in a way that is not just ad hoc and not just random and not just, oh, we were lucky. So how can we use validation to expand what we know and learn as quickly as possible about all of the unknowns around the product?
So Paul, you do this quite a lot. You spend a lot of time with clients. That's one of your things. Tell me a little bit more. How do you validate ideas? What is all this about?
Well, I think the first thing that's like traditionally the home base and where it all started, maybe you might even say 30 years ago with Scrum. It's this whole validation that we with Scrum call empiricism, right? So it's delivering a product every 2 weeks, and then also seeing what that product does in the marketplace. So over the years, we become better and better at delivering a product every 2 weeks. But hey, seeing what that thing does in the marketplace still needs a lot of improvement. So my efforts with clients are really based on that, because a lot of them, they have the Scrum thing down, they're delivering regularly, but they don't really have that feedback loop with the customer in place. So that's one element of it that we work on a lot. The other element is we used to think very much that building actual product is the means to validate whether you're heading in the right direction. But there's many more ways nowadays. So you don't have to actually build product to collect data to get some sense of whether you're heading in the right direction. And that's what we call discovery and validation. It's what we just built the one-day skills course on as well. But that's an area that's becoming more and more important for product ownership, so that you grasp that as well, and you can not just build too much stuff and invest too much heading in the wrong direction. So those are the two main things I would say.
Okay, so let me see if I get this right. So it's funny, as you were talking, both of you, about the sort of evolution of this thinking in the context of Scrum. When Scrum was created, delivering working software, which was really the focus of Scrum at that time, was really hard. It's sort of like an act of God to get stuff out the building, you know? I mean, it was, you had to move CDs around. I mean, it was tapes. I mean, it was hard. So the emphasis was very much on done and actually proving that you could get and refining that muscle. Now, what's interesting though is as we've improved our capabilities in that space, and as Scrum is being used in more and more variety of fields, the actual delivery, though is still a challenge, let's not get us wrong, isn't perhaps as important as delivering the right thing, right? And what we're talking about in this area really is, how do you deliver the right thing, and how do you make sure you're continuously, empirically, I love that word, Paul, delivering the right thing over and over and over again. Fredrik, have I got that right?
Yeah, and I just remembered that there's I saw this recording of a talk that Ed Deming did. I think it's back in the 80s, and he has this phrase. I'm not sure exactly how it was, but it's something like, "There's nothing as useless as perfectly building the wrong thing." And I think that's kind of head on what we're aiming for here, right? We like you said, it took a lot of effort back in the days to get products out, and later on learning whether it actually was the right thing or not. Sure, you can do some kind of interviewing and user studies, etc., but it's when it's in the hand of the real users that you get the real learning.
And also, let's be honest, back in the day, I hate to say it, you kind of were given what you were given, and you were willing to use it because that's all you'd ever get given, and it was better than perhaps the environment that you previously had. But now we've got more sophisticated users doing more complicated work. If it's an internal system or if it's an external system, you've got there's the sheer competition of demands on a human being, like whether it's banking or whatever, and the Generation Z, Generation X are more likely to move based on the experience that they have with the service that they provide. So you've got all of those things, and it's really changed. So Paul, when you're working with clients and helping them do that, is it how do you do that? I mean, what are the sort of ideas that you have to solve or get in there?
Yeah. So I think over the years we went from requirements, then you had business requirements and technical requirements, and we sort of already shifted that in a lot of areas to have it not be requirements but user stories. So a user story, which is not necessarily a requirement, but much more like a vehicle to engage in dialogue together to come up with the best solutions. So that's sort of an evolution of what teams were working on. But I think the next part of that evolution is, okay, we're talking user stories here, but we're still only talking solutions. And we're not talking about outcomes and impacts that we intend to arrive at with these solutions. So a lot of it is, and I think it's my dream that nothing will ever be pulled into a team with any customer outcome or desired business impact associated with it being front and center.
Yeah.
So that's really what's important, I think, to bring that desired outcome for the customer, to bring that desired impact for the business at the more granular level, at the smaller level, instead of these big business cases related to projects that nobody ever looks at, and then also be able to measure whether you're actually achieving that stuff. So that's like the major bit, and that's also why we think it's such an important part of product ownership, because people employing product ownership are also owning what lands in those teams. So it's too big of a thing to leave it up to the UX designer in the team, because a lot of those ideas have been in UX traditionally, but it's way bigger than that. So that's sort of the kind of things I'm trying to get across, and actually get them maybe to phrase some experiments instead of product backlog items, these kinds of things.
You've said so much there, Fredrik. You're sort of dying to jump in.
Which was to build on the next thing, but and when all of the things that Paul described, part of this evolving with validation is also figuring out, okay, so we ran a test, an experiment, we did an A/B test, or something like that, and so what do we do next? And figuring that out, how to feed the learning back into a decision-making process. That is the essence of leadership and product leadership, making decisions. Where do we want to go next? And so that whole, how you set up yourself and your team and your organization to make decisions, that is essentially how you evolve your product, right? So being cognizant of that decision-making process is also tightly connected to the data and the learning we get from these experiments and the validation we do.
Can I just sort of like lean into something, because I think this is something that's very often confusing, and I really would love you to sort of put the record straight here. So I'm working in a team. I'm given a backlog. I know that I said that on purpose, by the way, and I took those items, put them in my sprint. I'm working on an item. I'm delivering a feature. I'm not doing experiments. So how the point that I think you're raising, it sort of like tickles that. What do we mean by experiment here? Because I know that when I was working at Commercial Union, in the 90s, listening to Blur and Oasis, whilst I wrote code, I didn't think I experimented at all. I delivered features. So what would you say if somebody said, I don't experiment, I deliver stuff?
Oh, yes, you do. You experiment in the most expensive way. You build it with high quality, which I assume you did, Dave, and you excellent clean code and all of that thing.
Let's not go that far, but yes, let's pretend, yes.
But the overall idea, you did a very good job. You made sure it was going to scale, was secure, and all of these things, and then you shipped. And hopefully, someone had decided, whether it was you or someone else, that this was going to create value, and you just hope that it's going to create value. So the question is, and you likely got some feedback, right? Either people loved it, or they used it, or they sent a bug request, or they just said, no, this is not the right product for us anymore. So that is an experiment. It's just very expensive, very high risk. And the way we want to address in this capability area here is to try to find ways of learning these things with lower risk, lower cost.
Yeah.
So hang on. So I've been given this feature. So you're telling me that the first thing that I should ask is, okay, what's the cheapest way that we can do some work to validate that this feature is actually the feature that they want, that it delivers value?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. But there's a step before that. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna need to ask why a couple of times to figure out what actually the intended value is of that feature. Yeah, because you're not gonna even spend the least amount of money if you don't know what the desired outcome is. So
hang on a
so
minute.
that's
Are you telling me? I just need to get to the bottom of this because
yeah,
I'm pretending to be Dave West in the 90s. I still had hair, by the way, which would be a shock until 96, and it all fell out. But anyway, so I'm Dave. I'm Dave West sitting in the 90s. I've been giving a feature. The first thing that I need to ask is why. What is the intended value? Is it my job to determine that? Is it everybody's job to determine
no,
that?
not. I think that's the job of product ownership. It's not the job of you Dave West, as a developer, right?
But that's the team accountability in Scrum, right? If we want to blend this in to make sure that what we're doing is useful and valuable. So you got your feature request, Dave, right, that you had in your hand. So I would say, yes, accept it and go with it. But, before you start jumping into thinking of solutions, etc., just make sure, do I understand who is going to be happy when I deliver this? And if you don't know, someone usually knows, right? Or you could ask, what if this is actually going to take, 3 months, or we're not going to be able to complete this technically this year? What happens? And when you say that to whoever you talk to, your stakeholder or someone that asks for this feature, then they're going to start explaining the value. If we don't do this within 6 months, we're going to get fined. Okay, so you want to avoid the fine. That's the end goal we're trying to achieve. Okay, now I can go with that, and I can make sure, and I can start taking accountability and responsibility of actually achieving this outcome that the stakeholder actually wanted.
So what you're saying is that at a product owner level, it's important that you refine the product backlog items so they have clear connection to the why. At the developer and team level, the Scrum team level, it is our responsibility to ultimately take that why and really lean into it to build experiments and functionality and capabilities that both validate that why and execute on that why in the most economic form. Is that the essence of what you're describing?
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And for some of those features and ideas, there's higher uncertainty, or there's a higher risk on problem when you actually do it wrong. And for those, you want to use cheaper techniques than just building it, shipping it, and see what the market thinks.
Yeah.
And that's where we have this capability of evolving with validation. How can you learn and validate stuff without and not just building it?
Yeah, but so and then there's a ton of stuff related to that underneath. So it's about matching the investment level on the confidence that you or the evidence that you have. It's about designing experiments or hypotheses that will give you a high likelihood of getting some meaningful data. It's about how you feeding data back into the decision-making process, and all of that stuff. So that's really what this is about. Yeah.
So what I'm taking from it, really, which is something that I probably should already know, considering I'm a product owner, is that ultimately this distinction about the why and the how and the what, and really it is a team sport. However, I'm leading the team with respect to the why, and then the team engage. Everybody is responsible for the economics of the delivery, really, and that's something that historically teams have not felt necessarily that accountability. You basically I deliver amazing, reasonable quality, though I always aspired to a little bit better than I did. You get sidetracked on a Friday, but everything was a nail that I was given, and I hammered it. I never once stood back and said, okay, I understand the why. Let's look at the predictability of that outcome, and let's look at validating it before we invest in 100,000 lines of code and Dave West's amazing piece of software.
Yeah. And
Fredrik.
I don't know, yeah, Fredrik, go ahead.
So even Ed Deming back in the days, they had this problem. But what has happened in the last couple of decades is that the world has turned a lot more digital. A lot of the services we consume and use, etc., they're digital. And so the pace of how competition can ship and learn and get in front of customers has changed a lot. And so while you, Dave, you weren't asked that question as often, is this going to be, financially, economically wise? We in this landscape of a higher level of competition, it's just a tougher climate these days, and we need to be more certain that what we're doing is going to be the right thing.
Yeah, I think that is that. Yeah, in the 90s, it wasn't a massively digital world that we were living in, and the level of competition. It was, that what do they say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, or you don't have to be the fastest runner, you just have to be faster than the slowest one. That was
Yeah.
definitely the world that we lived in. As we've
Mm-hmm.
become, as everybody's got faster at running, that bear is getting very close to biting
Yeah.
us, and
Yeah.
and I think that everybody has a responsibility and an ownership, and that's one thing I really like about Scrum that is a little different from how traditional waterfall-esque, even dare I say Silicon Valley's approach to delivering software is. We encourage more ownership by the teams, more engagement by the teams, so that product ownership, though there is a product owner ultimately determining the
Yeah.
why and setting the
Yeah.
direction, it's a team sport, really. It has to
It
be.
is, and it's gonna become even more wild in the quite near future, because like you said, we becoming better at running faster.
Yeah.
But hey, we have this whole AI thing coming, and that will make everybody able to do anything. Dave West could be a movie director. So 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 the whole emphasis will be shifting towards IDs, towards, hey, what outcomes would be valuable? Hey, how are we gonna have an impact? That it will shift more and more towards that, because you can much more directly achieve those
And there's even, so we're obviously doing a number of experiments at Scrum.org with the use of LLMs, and really what is the future, and what I'm very cognizant of is that you can't predict. So you build a model, you create a series of data packs, you then execute that model, it then behaves, is used, that unique interaction between the user and the model creates, and then you have to refine that model based on experience. What's interesting also is that the cost is lower to get things out and to experiment, but the likelihood of success is also lower, because it is very, very worrying. As a product owner, it just means that I have to spend my whole life testing ideas, asking why, refining the vision, going back to the vision. It's just exhausting, chaps. I'm not going to lie, but it's a team. But I have a team around me that can help me, and I think that's a really important message.
and you'll have AI helping you too.
Yes, to the moment it doesn't seem to be able to help me that much, but
No, it's
I was trying to cheat and use AI to pick my English Premier League fantasy team, and it's not done very well, actually.
it's not good.
Yeah, it's not quite as good as I would like it to be, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Which is probably good, and probably means it's going to be more fun in the long run anyway. So all right, so we're coming out to the end of our time, and we try to keep these a little short. Is there any final words for somebody that's looking at this capability in the capability model, evolve with validation, and saying, okay, what's the first thing I should do? What's the thing I should focus on? is there any sort of final words around that?
Yeah. So I would say experiment with your experimentation.
Oh
So,
gosh, very meta.
So yeah. So the way that you work, you're gonna need to figure out if that works or not too. Yeah, so if you're gonna try and make steps in using data more in your development process, then experiment with that as well, and then also take your environment along in the fact that it's an experiment, because that's often that takes away a lot of resistance from those around you when you're all of a sudden say, hey, we don't know for sure, we're going to be testing, and then if you frame that as an experiment, then it usually takes you a bit further.
Frederick?
And of course, if this field is kind of new to you and you want to learn what's in and out of this area, then of course the discovery and validation class with us is a good start to give you the central ideas where to go, and then you can learn from there.
Yes, well, thank you. That's a nice plug for a class. And actually that class changed our behavior in Scrum.org. It actually created the beta program that we now have on the website, which we'd never had before. It also created, though we did beta classes, we weren't explicit. So our betas were quite expensive. So we looked at how can we reduce the cost of that, meaning get data back. So by putting things on the website, obviously we started to understand who was interested in this class, and then we had the opportunity to reach out to them and talk to them without them having to go on the class, which gave us the ability to improve and refine our understanding of the class. Obviously we have to get better there, but that was a start, and it was driven by that class, which is kind of cool. Well, gentlemen, as always, I learned a couple of things today, which is always a good thing. This idea of value and validation. I think something that Paul said about it's not just at the business case. Should we even do this set of features, this product goal? It's at it's at that level, obviously, but it's also at much smaller granular level, whether it's a feature, a capability, a part of the value stream. Those ideas often are not as well understood as you would think. So validation in the most economic form possible. We learned about product owner setting the why and teams really leaning into that why and trying to do the most economic thing to validate that assumption and move that process forward. We sort of highlighted the fact that validation is a team sport, and that you've got as product ownership is supported by empowered teams, because I think that scales it in a way that perhaps things like product ops, etc., don't, which is interesting. And ultimately I think we learned today that value is what we all pursue, and value, particularly in this modern digital age with the prospect of LLMs and AI, value is a very fleeting, complicated beast, and you have to manage those surprises frequently to determine whether something's valuable and whether something isn't. So thank you for listening to today's Scrum.org community podcast. Thank you, Paul and Frederick,
Thank
for
you.
spending the time, which I'm always very happy to see your faces. So thank you for that. And thank you for listening, everybody. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, a little bit of Agile sprinkled in. Thanks, everybody. Scrum on.